The newest business of the 70s was the business of technology. In 1971, the Intel Corporation created the first computer chip, which was used to create the first microprocessor. In 1976, Apple Computers, led by Steve Jobs, released the first ever personal computer. When the company went public in 1979, it instantly created about 300 millionaires, more than any other company in history. The 70s took place during the fear and tension of the Cold War. President Nixon looked for advice on foreign affairs from Henry Kissinger. Kissinger promoted realpolitik, the idea that foreign policy should be for power, not ideals or moral principles. Kissinger became the Secretary of State and was seen as a stable presence throughout the Watergate scandal. Nixon made vast strides in reopening foreign affairs with China. In 1971, Communist China was admitted into the United Nations, replacing Taiwan, referred to as Nationalist China. Early that year, Nixon visited the communist nation and later Moscow, thus starting a period of détente. For the first time in decades, the United States felt safer and internationally united. Tensions were also eased when the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty, or SALT I, was signed in 1972 by Nixon and Russian leader Brezhnev. This agreement froze all nuclear ICBMs at their present levels, greatly calming fears of nuclear war. Also that year, the U.S. troops were pulled out of Vietnam, which ended in a stalemate. In January of 1973, formal peace accords were signed. In 1971, Congress had passed the 26th Amendment, which lowered the voting age from 21 to 18. This was in response to protests that men couldn't even vote were fighting in Vietnam. Although 1972 signified a year of great positive strides in foreign affairs, the year did have one outstanding tragedy. On August 8th, Palestinian terrorists had taken 11 Israeli coaches and athletes hostage during the Munich Olympics. All 11 were killed. This was only the beginning of rising Middle Eastern conflict. In 1973, Syria and Egypt attacked Israel on the Jewish holiday Yom Kippur, igniting the Yom Kippur War. When the U.S. supported Israel, Arab countries of OPEC started the gas crisis of America. The next year, the war ended in victory for Israel. In 1975, South Vietnam surrendered to North Vietnam, causing many Americans to feel as if their previous war efforts had been in vain. Although President Jimmy Carter is often accredited for doing very little domestically, he is praised for the Camp David Accords. Signed in March 1979, the Accords were a peace treaty between Egyptian Prime Minister Anwar Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin, and negotiated by Carter. But 1979 was not all a success for foreign policy. In January, the Iranian Revolution began when the U.S.-friendly Shah of Iran fled and Western society-hating Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini took power. Stemming from this, Iranian students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and took 65 American hostages. Once again, the U.S. was gripped with fear. The hostages were not released for over a year, and the affair greatly affected Carter's loss in the next presidential election. In sports, American Mark Spitz won 7 gold medals for swimming at the Olympics, a record that would remain unbroken until 2008, and the Steelers won the Super Bowl a whopping 4 times that decade. But the athlete that broke the most records and won America's heart was a horse. Secretariat won the Triple Crown in 1973, marking the first U.S. win in 25 years, and setting records that have still not been broken today. Almost everyone in America owned a TV. Shows such as The Brady Bunch and The Partridge Family of the early 70s catered to the rise in conservatism, featuring clean-cut families that solved their minor problems by the end of each episode. MASH was a show about soldiers in the Korean War. However, it actually represented the struggles and American disapproval of the Vietnam War that most viewers resented. The Mary Tyler Moore Show was a show about a 30-year-old single woman living alone and having her own career. It symbolized how women of the 70s were starting to accept independent women. Another show that displayed acceptance of rights was Roots. In this 1977 miniseries, this depicted of African American culture and slave trade of the 18th century. It won 9 Emmy Awards, created an interest in African history, and a rise in Black Power sentiment. The Jeffersons was a TV show that combined conservative family values and African American rights. It was the first show made for Black families. The films of the 70s were revolutionary and still some of the best movies today. Saturday Night Fever of 1977 fully embodied the disco movie movement of that time and made John Travolta a 70s heartthrob. The Godfather series started in the 70s. The Godfather came out in 1972, and The Godfather 2 made just as big as a hit in 1974. The two movies about a family mafia are still thought of as a masterpiece today. The Godfather movies, along with Rocky, a wildly popular boxing movie released in 1976, made several Italian actors famous. Names like Al Pacino, Sylvester Stallone, and Robert De Niro dominated magazines and box offices, and they still are action film legends to this day, seen as the major machos of movies. But the movie series that spanned the longest, impacting more generations, action figures, and even religions than any other movies of the 70s, and possibly ever, was Star Wars. Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope was released on May 25, 1977. The movie takes place long, long ago in a galaxy far, far away, which is all the viewer will ever learn about the setting. Mark Hamill plays Luke Skywalker, an orphan teen living on a desert planet that he desperately yearns to leave. His opportunity comes when he meets Ben, or Obi-Wan Kenobi, an old Jedi Master. Jedis are now almost non-existent and believe in the Force, an invisible positive nature that strengthens those who believe and train in it. Only those who are patient and selfless can master it, for obtaining evil and greed will lead you to the dark side. Luke joins Obi-Wan and rebellious Han Solo, played by Harrison Ford, to help rescue Princess Leia, actress Carrie Fisher, from the Darth Vader. The premise sounds simple enough, but the movie, by George Lucas, was revolutionary. Not only were the effects advanced for the time, and the action never ending, but it was the first serious science fiction film created. The space and alternate universe concept sparked hits like Star Trek and Lord of the Rings. It was also impactful because of its deeper meanings. The Dark Imperial Emperor and the Valiant Rebels signified good people working to change an oppressive system, a concept that was not new to the rebellious teens of the late 70s. When Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back came out in 1979, the series began. While movie production flourished in the 70s, art experienced a decline. Much of this is because music and films became art in the 70s. The first Sundance Film Festival was in 1978 and is an event where independent filmmakers can showcase their talent, just like a gallery for painters or sculptors. The one main artist that remained conventional in the 70s was Andy Warhol, and you can hardly call his work conventional. A major artist for the stars in the 60s, Andy Warhol continued on into the 70s, making prints with neon colors and bold lines, which created a style called pop art. He often depicted commercial items like Campbell's chicken noodle soup and Coca-Cola, symbolizing just how far-reaching American commercialism had become. But the main art in the 70s remained fashion and music. Fashion of the early 70s stemmed from hippie 60s. Bohemian or retro fashion became the rage. Prairie Girl long skirts by Laura Ashley, lace ponchos by Ozzie Clark, and leather fringe vests paired with boots were the style as teens listened to classic rock and folk.
It's 9 o'clock on a Saturday. The regular crowd shuffles in. There's an old man sitting next to me, making love.
In 1972, David Bowie stepped onto the stage as Ziggy Stardust. He was androgynous, controversial, and the creator of glam rock. Glam rock styles included men with makeup, long hair, platform shoes, and lots of glitter. Zandra Rhodes emerged as a major designer, creating custom costumes for Freddie Mercury of Queen. She would remain a prominent designer of the 70s and 80s. Glam rock was popular, but too crazy to ever become a mainstream style.
It's a matter of fact, his eyes are as red as the sun. And the girl in the corner that no one ignores, she thinks that she's the passionate one. It's like lightning.
In response to the wild controversy of glam rock, conservative family groups rose to the scene. The Jackson 5 and clean-cut Donny Osmond sang their way into the hearts of preteen girls everywhere. Styles also became conservative. The leisure suit by Yves Saint Laurent became a regular for men, and even women wore pantsuits. Calvin Klein and Ralph Lauren made ready-to-wear outfits. The simple clashing pattern styles became the casual everyday wear of the 70s. Starting in 1976, things changed. Two major and completely contrasting movements began. Disco music, funky electronic beats to dance to, became popular, especially with the release of Saturday Night Fever. Teens would dress up in newly commercialized Lyrica Ogurix jumpsuits by Roy Halston and run off to discotheques to dance under streaming colored lights. Disco ended partner dancing and brought about a quest for acrobatic and complicated moves. It is a staple of the 70s, bringing about the first synthesizer use. The opposite of the upbeat and fun-loving disco was punk. Punk originated in England as a way to express disgust at the conformity and the depressing atmosphere due to a bad economy. Malcolm McLaren and Vivienne Westwood started a shop that featured leather, chains, and studs. McLaurin's band, the Sex Pistols, spread punk to the United States. The band, featuring Johnny Rotten and Sid Vicious, was meant to shock with onstage cutting, screaming, and spitting. Punk style spread to teens as they sported spiked hair and do-it-yourself piercings. Zandra Rhodes created punk chic, a toned-down, classier version of the popular street punk. The theatrics used by punk rock artists varied greatly. Groups like the Ramones from New York went on stage in ripped jeans and t-shirts, while Kiss, another New York band, decked out in full makeup reminiscent of the glam rock days. All types of punk rock music, however, featured loud drums and guitar solos, accompanied by screeching yelling for vocals. Punk was the first time music was supposed to be bad. The louder and more shocking, the better. It was a way for teens to release anger, frustration, and rebellion. The 80s would feature more punk rock, leather, and the emergence of metal. People of the 70s were a culture of those between decades. They didn't embody just one idea or movement. Tom Wolfe dubbed it the Me Decade because anything went. There were various groups and stereotypes that designated your lifestyle and aspirations. The 70s included the emergence of conflict with the Middle East, something that has yet to be resolved, and new business and technology. The 1970s, a decade of disco, detente, and those darn gas prices.